All right, and next we'll kind of get into a topic that I'm sure is top of mind for many of you watching today, but it's really about the question of what's on the horizon for Alberta. How do we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, and what impacts has the pandemic had on the economy and the labor market, and what's next after that? So towards a resilient recovery, we first have to really acknowledge the impacts that the pandemic and the ensuing labor market challenges have had on the province as a whole. Business expansion as a result of COVID. So we're currently doing a study where we're interviewing and surveying companies across Alberta to try to understand this. And what we saw is that actually a lot of companies within the digital economy really saw the pandemic as an opportunity to be bold, change, or expand their businesses. What I mean by this is, of course, the initial period of lockdowns in 2020 did have an adverse impact on all businesses, but digital economy businesses did prove to be more resilient. They are able to have more workers that can work remotely, of course, or do jobs even outside of Alberta. And as a result, they were able to kind of maybe look at how do we change business models to suit new needs that may emerge in the market, and how do we offer new products and services to people. So key areas of expansion that we saw among these companies were really in areas like R&D and commercialization. So in some cases, really figuring out how to take products to market, especially outside of Canada during that period. New product development, so new needs that might have emerged from the pandemic, and companies saw ways that they could fill this with their expertise or skill sets at hand, and international market penetration. But definitely overall, what we really found, which is a little bit surprising, is that this kind of notion of the ability to really kind of roll with those changes and find opportunities within them. So change their businesses, expand, and maybe even diversify their business. In terms of how it's impacted companies in Alberta, again, really what we're seeing is largely minimal impact by the pandemic for digital economy companies. A lot of the time, it really was seen even as a catalyst for growth. So something that kind of propelled companies to maybe try a new area that they hadn't previously expanded on, or again, seek new markets outside of Alberta and even outside of Canada. Now, what we see is that a lot of companies felt that it was really pretty much split down the middle. Companies that felt that the pandemic had little or no impact on them, and others that felt that it had completely changed their business, either temporarily or in the long term in terms of business models. But overall, what we also see is that a lot of the digital economy companies that we spoke to in Alberta felt that their business was resilient as a result of the pandemic. So either that they would maintain levels that they previously had before the pandemic in terms of growth, output, and labor market, or that they would exceed it. There was really not that much of kind of negative sentiment of companies that thought, I'm really going to be in a worse off position than I was pre-pandemic once this is over, whenever that is. And this also kind of rippled over to hiring too. So initially our kind of assumption was that maybe during the pandemic, companies would be a bit more conservative. They might have to kind of tighten their belts a little bit, maybe not hire as much as they had planned to pre-pandemic, but it really turned out to be the opposite in some cases. Here we see that about 62% of companies actually did hire during the pandemic, and hired more significantly than they had planned to. So previous hiring plans in, say, January 2020, they had exceeded those during the pandemic. Another thing that we saw is that there's very few layoffs, even for companies that didn't hire. So where about 38% said, actually, no, I didn't hire more than I planned to. In some cases, maybe even less than I had planned to pre-pandemic. Where they did lay off staff, it was often temporary, or it was more kind of for support related roles, not core digital economy roles. So the jobs that we saw in some of the earlier slides, like the software developers, data scientists, machine learning engineers, still significant demand for those, and none of the employers that we spoke to recorded laying off that type of staff. And in terms of high growth areas, we really also kind of wanted to speak to companies within the digital economy in the province to see where they thought the greatest opportunity was for Alberta going forward. And when we asked this question, certainly a number of different key sectors came up, but the biggest one that companies overwhelmingly thought had the highest growth potential for Alberta, so in terms of being able to attract investment, create new technologies, and innovate, and create labor market opportunities for Albertans, was renewable energy or clean energy. You'll see gold mine here in quotes, and that's because that's one of the phrases that was provided to us in some of our interviews in the survey. This was kind of the key area that Albertan business owners really saw as a potential growth opportunity for the province, alongside, of course, others like fintech, especially in terms of business-to-business sales, and in other areas like interactive digital media, advanced manufacturing, and digital health. So what kind of jobs are in demand? Well, some of them are quite similar to what we saw even a couple of years ago in Alberta. So jobs like data scientists, software developers, UX designers, full stack developers, cybersecurity specialists, still very much in demand. And we're also seeing growth in other areas, for example, like technical artists. And this one is interesting to really point out because it signals a bit of a shift in terms of the types of companies that may be relocating to Alberta that are looking to hire talent. Technical artists are very common in kind of the creative technology space, so interactive digital media, if you want to liken it to anything, but they are working in areas like visual effects, animation, and Calgary, being one of the North America's top destinations for film and TV, is something that can really benefit from this growth going forward. We're also seeing other jobs like business analysts that are seeing increasing demand, product managers and product designers. So roles that I would call more technology adjacent, not kind of core digital roles like DevOps or data scientists, but ones that work very closely and that are needed to kind of really support the digital economy businesses. And then I do just kind of want to provide a bit of an overview of what this actually means in terms of numbers. It's one thing to say these jobs are in demand. It's another thing to really understand how many jobs these are. And what I'm going to provide on these next two slides are just snapshots of the hottest jobs in Calgary and Edmonton, being the two largest cities in Alberta's digital economy. And these are just the top 5 jobs that we see that were in demand in Calgary in 2021 alone. So we see that software engineers, for example, that's almost 2,000 jobs that were posted during 2021 among Alberta digital economy companies. Business analysts, another key one that saw significant demand, cybersecurity specialists, full stack, and data analysts. And this little funny looking web here on the bottom is just to give you an idea of the skills that are associated with some of the jobs that are outlined here. In this case, this is a software engineer, and also the importance of the different skills, right? Not every skill is weighted equally. Some might be more nice to have, others are critical. So this is just to give a bit of an idea of what that looks like. And similarly for Edmonton, also these are the top 5 jobs that we saw in the city. Some are they're quite similar, just maybe reversed in terms of where they stand on the top 5 scale, but also significant hiring that we're seeing in Edmonton for some of these roles. And again, this web at the bottom is really the representation of skills relevant to, in this case, a cybersecurity specialist, and the importance of those different skills. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me anytime.